Ready, fellas?
Let's do it.
All right. Welcome back for another episode of Dogs Daily. And we're kind of a little different right now, right? So we've been under Dogs Daily, and now we've kind of switched up our branding a little bit. We're going to be known from here on out as Classic City Sports, kind of keyed off from what I usually say at the end of the episodes. So I kind of liked it. We stuck with it and kind of made something new with it. New platform to come to you guys on. Hopefully this worked out right. If you're able to watch this on YouTube, that means it was a successful first run for us. We're kicking off our second season here, and we're trying something new. We wanted to bring better content and everything like that to you guys. So hopefully you're able to watch this on YouTube right now, or if not, you can still listen to it the same way you've been, and that's through our any podcast network that you can, Apple Podcast, or Spotify, all that kind of stuff. So nothing else changed there. Still going to have those options available. Hopefully you can also see us now. We're sitting here actually in the room together with a camera in front of us for the first time. Haven't done it before, so we'll see how it goes. If you're listening to this and the video is not out there somewhere, didn't go well, and you can make a joke to us on social media about it. But as always, Jeremiah Stoddard here. We've got Jonathan Williams to my side, and then Kyle Funderburk over on the corner here for us. We're just excited to get everything going. We've been out of it for about a month and a half now. We took all of July. We were planning to jump back into everything in August. Took us a little bit to get into it in August. A lot going on, obviously. But there's a lot of content to cover. So a lot of key things happened. NIL completely kicked in, so we saw how that kind of played out a little bit. You got Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC, so that's also huge news and it's going to change everything in the long run. So we can kind of break that stuff down a little bit as well. And then lately, there's a lot of injury stuff popping up with Georgia right now. So that's some stuff we can talk about. There was some news that broke today on that we'll get deeper into, with some key injuries for Georgia leading into that Clemson matchup here in a couple of weeks. And as I always say, today is Wednesday, August 18th, about 7:15. So hopefully we have this out to you guys in the next day or so, and you're watching kind of fresh here. So just like I said, some changes coming up, so we'll see how quickly I can get stuff out to you guys on there. But we'll go ahead and jump straight into it, and we'll save the big injury stuff until the end. It's key players. I'll go ahead and say names on it, because most likely if you're a Georgia fan and you follow stuff, already. It came out today that Darnell Washington and Tyke Smith both had injuries, and the last day of fall camp, basically, last couple days of fall camp, they had a big injury come up. So we'll get into all of that and kind of list the entire injury, report for Georgia at this point that we've now established throughout fall and, before fall, that's really stacked up going into Clemson. So we'll get into all of that at the end, save it kind of. But we'll start with Oklahoma and Texas wanting to join the SEC. Now, there's a lot of speculation of when it's going to happen, but the fact it's happening is it's there, that's happening at this point. So I'll go ahead and kick it over. We'll start with you guys on this. What was your initial thought when you heard that Texas and Oklahoma was going to join the SEC?
Annoyance. One word, annoyance.
I was just in disbelief. I honestly didn't think there was any traction to it. I thought it was all just a big bluff. I thought there was no way that Texas and Oklahoma both want to join the SEC, just because I feel like they're in the perfect situation over there in the Big 12 already with the competition that they deal with every year. So, which now, of course, you understand why they would want to join the SEC. If you ever want to know why something's happening, just think about money. I mean, money is the easiest way to figure out why someone is choosing to do something. And the SEC brings in a lot of money. I mean, heck, Vanderbilt brings in more money than most football programs in the nation, and they are by far not one of the most elite football programs. So that tells the whole story for you right there as to why they would want to join. But I still didn't believe that it was going to happen.
Yeah, I didn't believe it was going to happen either. I thought it was going to be more of a power play to force the Big 12's hand into expansion that should have happened years ago. You can remember they almost added some teams, and that led to them just going ahead and creating a championship game with just 10 teams instead. So I thought it was just going to be a big power play to get Tulane or Memphis or Cincinnati or UCF to join the Big 12. But there was a meeting between those two schools and the Big 12 conference, and Big 12 said the meeting went well, and the next day the two teams are out. So
yeah, I mean,
I guess they just didn't want to add any teams.
No, I mean it's a weird. I've looked over this whole thing a few times on it, and I've thought about it as several different directions that it could have brought to college football, how it could have benefited college football, how it could potentially hurt college football, like all of the different sides to it. And one, I'm going to comment on, like you were talking about how they went down to 10 teams with their, conference championship and stuff. It's the Big 12 and they don't have 12 teams. That's the first, funny part of it, I guess. And now they just lost,
and they had to at least add one team to stay as an automatic into the playoffs. That one team was West Virginia.
Yeah. So now they've got that looming, with all of the changes that's going on right now with the college football playoff coming up, that's being expanded, and all of the stuff that's coming into factor in the near future. I'll start with how I was originally thinking it could benefit college football with that move happening, because I had the same thought too, and I was like, well, they can't just stay with the same number of teams they have. So like they would have to add people to the conference. Then there was a lot of talk about them joining up and kind of combining with the American Conference as a whole. And I was like, well, that would bring, because the big argument everybody talked about with the, we sat here and talked about with the playoff changing to 12 teams. One of the things we talked about was it might bring more parity to college football because stuff can grow in different ways. Some of these smaller schools will have a better chance of becoming a bigger name and getting bigger recruits because of different things, like having that actual chance to make the playoffs because of the expansion. We were thinking, that's a potential change on it, right? Well, had the American Conference had the chance to join up with the Big 12 to rebuild that, had they actually done that, it could have done the same thing, because those smaller teams will now be with a bigger name conference, part of the Power Five, and they could have at that point had a better chance to join the playoff, be in the playoffs and stuff like that, have a chance at a big conference championship, to do all of that. But instead they didn't join with the the Big 12. That hasn't happened, or it seems like that's been snuffed out and not really happening in general at this point. So we'll see if that changes down the road, but that would be where it could have been beneficial to college football, right? Like the move of Texas and Oklahoma moving to the SEC could have been beneficial if that's how the Big 12 handled it. Instead, what could happen from my perspective at this point is not only did they lose those teams, that was the biggest two names in the entire conference by far. The whole conference could get dissolved.
It's gone.
Like exactly. And so like
it's gone.
If that happens, at that point you've now kind of damaged college football as a whole, as far as like the parity argument, like across college football. Like it's not going to happen because you've basically taken the chance for that away, and you've actually made it more difficult for that to be a thing. You've now brought more of the nation's top teams into the same conference, where we've already had the argument to be, are there going to be two? Is it possible for there to be 3 SEC teams in a 4-team playoff? That's the argument that's been there like for a little bit now. Like that's something that everyone's already talked about. Well, now Oklahoma is almost always in the playoffs. So that was the Big 12 representative. That was the other random conference representative outside of Clemson, SEC being like Georgia, Bama, or one of those teams. Even Texas A&M was on the brinks of it. Well, now you have Oklahoma being on the brinks of it, but they're also part of the SEC. And you've now made it even tighter as far as where the talent is, where the good teams are. And you've really, really added it to the SEC, which once again, it's like, if you want to know why somebody does something, it's money. It's always money. And they're going to make a lot of money. The TV contracts are going to be astronomical because ESPN pays a fortune for SEC games and to all the schools individually. And ABC/ESPN signed that huge contract to take over like the primetime SEC game. That CBS 3:30 game is now going to be changed over in 2023, I believe. Somebody can correct me on that if I'm wrong, but I think it's 2023. So you've got all it's the money that's made them make that decision. In fact, technically, they can't get out of their own TV contract with the Big 12 and everything, or is it Fox? It's Fox. Until 2025 is what they'd be locked into. That is when they could join the SEC. To get out of it, they would have to, each team, I believe it was around $75 million or something, that they would each have to pay to get out of it. And the question isn't, if Texas or anything to do it. It's like basically like if Oklahoma's going to be able to pay the money to do it, they want to do it as early as coming to the SEC like next year. Like that's the talks, is they're trying to figure out if they're going to be able to buy out of that. They're going to spend that much money to get out because of how much money they're going to make in turn by going over to the SEC. And it just comes down if they're going to be able to put up the money next year. They would come as soon as next year, theoretically, but technically speaking, they aren't coming until 2025.
Well, then also what all of this has caused, and this has just been kind of recent news, is that the Big 12, the Big 10, and the ACC now are trying to create like some sort of alliance against the SEC, because Greg Sankey is basically coming out here and saying, anybody of you big schools out there, like we want Clemson, we want Florida State, we want anybody, bring it all in. We want all of you in our conference right now. We want all of the blue bloods in this conference right now. And so the ACC is like, well, shoot, we lose Clemson, we're done. Or the Big Ten's like, heck, if we lose Ohio State, we're done. We're back. We're in the same position that the Big 12 is. So now you're seeing them all hit the panic button right now, like, hey, we got to figure something out, because if not, this is basically going to be college football SEC league. Like that's basically what this is leaning towards, because Oklahoma and Texas are just the beginning of it, because once everybody else sees that big paycheck that Oklahoma and Texas gets that first year that they're in the SEC, what do you think other teams are going to do? Oh, I want some of that money. I want a big paycheck too. I want my program to have a bunch of money as well. So it's not even just affecting the Big 12. All the other Power 5 conferences are going to get involved in this, and they're all going to start panicking, as they already have.
Absolutely. And like that's the thing, is basically that's what it's been said too, is Greg Sankey was saying, hey, we'll take anybody. You know, if you want to come and you'll pay them the money to do all the stuff and like that, well, it has to be voted on by like the teams in there. But once again, it still makes everybody money by them coming in. It's think about it. Now, Oklahoma and Texas being into the conference, that's now 2 more games that they have on their schedule potentially, or 1 more game if it's like each conference kind of thing. That's going to be a bigger matchup. I mean, shoot, even that's better than playing against Vanderbilt. That's better than playing Tennessee. It's better than playing Missouri lately. It's better than a lot. Some of the teams in the SEC at this point have kind of started to slope down pretty aggressively, especially like teams like Tennessee, like I just said, and Vanderbilt, who knows what's going on with them at this point. So now that gave them the opportunity to have that better game on their schedule, you know, and the next question is, how does the SEC handle that, right? So right now are they putting one of them on each side and just kind of calling it like that? Are they going to realign everything? That's the talks. Have you seen all of the different speculations of like the realignment of the SEC and like moving the conferences around? There was one, and it was a while ago, and I think I pulled it up at one point with you guys, and I can't remember. I forgot about it until right now, but it was like the most ridiculous lineup of like, it was a Tennessee fan that posted it on like this message board.
There you go. That
explains it. Right. Well, that's the first, key to why it's so crazy. But it basically had all of the powerhouses in one conference side and Tennessee on the other side. Like literally, like it was like Bama, Auburn, LSU, Georgia were all on the same side. Florida was also like, it was like basically they wanted to play with Missouri, Kentucky, South Carolina, and like it was.
They're still the 4th best team.
I was about to say it's still go what 5-5, 7-7 or whatever.
But that's what it was like. The Tennessee fan was like, "This is what I would like to see," and I'm like, "I'm sure you would. Yeah, I would like to be in that situation as well. That'd be fantastic."
Would want to be in
like
there.
It's already the SEC East in the past. Like there's already been the narrative of it not being that strong in comparison to the West, and the main reason for that is Bama. That's not exactly the most fair reason to say that in general.
Well, the programs on the West have always been, more consistent than the programs on the East.
Yeah.
Ole Miss is always more reliable to give you a 10-win season than Kentucky or Vandy. West is always LSU, Bama, Auburn.
Yeah.
And the West has always been stronger. Just for a little while, the East was top heavy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Back when everyone says the East was stronger, it was just 3 teams.
Yeah.
It's 3 teams. But to be
the
fair,
West is always a toss-up.
It's a toss-up, and the West is a little more consistent with that random team that ends up popping up like that. Mm-hmm. With the East, going into the season, who's going to be what, right? Like we can look at the SEC East right now and say you got Georgia's going. Like I don't see Georgia not winning the East this year because Florida really fell off after last year as far as their entire roster and all that good stuff there. So they're completely changing how their offense is overnight, basically. So they're going to drop off in a way. Tennessee is just I can't even say the words that I want to say about like what they are in their program right now. It's just a dumpster fire. And Vanderbilt has not even slightly improved over like the last ever. I mean, they're constantly losing 10 games in a year, like that kind of seasons. Like they are never bowl eligible. Like they're always just low. Like they don't ever gain that momentum up. So they're still not, and they haven't made anything to change that yet. So they're still not going to make that change and that jump. And Missouri, they started strong when they came into the SEC. But then after the first 2 years where they won the SEC East, as soon as they came in the door, it has just constantly been downhill since then. And they haven't really, you thought maybe with like Drew Lock, who is, in the NFL now and he's playing well, and you thought maybe they were going to be able to do some more, and they just haven't been able to put it together. They can't. I don't know if it's like they're struggling to keep up with recruiting wise in the SEC
They just benefited from the circumstances at the time.
Yeah. I mean, that Georgia team they beat back in 2013 had a slew of injuries. I mean, after that Tennessee game alone, I mean, Georgia was a deadbeat horse when they
Florida
played them.
was just beat up that year.
Yeah, and they were. But I mean, even speaking now wise, it's not even like teams like Missouri who entered in the conference. I mean, more recently, I wouldn't say it's very recent anymore, but like. Today, South Carolina activated a grad assistant to come play quarterback because he had years eligible to play because they have so many injuries in their quarterback room. So that's who they're relying on, is someone who was hired as a grad assistant and now is going to be playing football for the Gamecocks. But going back to the format of how I think you have to manage this when you're adding in teams, especially when you're adding in teams to conference, I think, Kyle, you really agree with this too, is that you have to go with the pod system. I think the pod system is the best way to go about this, where it's like you have like 4 teams and like however many pods. You'd have like Georgia, Florida, Kentucky, and like South Carolina in a pod. And then you could have like Missouri and some other teams. Then you have the West, you have Alabama, Auburn, and like Ole Miss. Like I think that's the best way to do it, because then those teams play their teams in the pod every year, and then you get some out of pod games every single year as well. And you get to switch up the opponents enough to where it's not like where you try and keep the same format where Georgia tries and plays Auburn every year, and then you add in just one other Western opponent. I think that's the best way, where you get the teams playing each other enough. And I think that's just the best way to structure it, to where you're not having to say like, okay, well, we're going to throw in Auburn and Alabama into the East and dramatically increase the difficulty it is to play over in the Eastern Division, and throw in and trade them in for Texas and Oklahoma. If you're Texas A&M, you're probably loving that, because who else is your competition other than Oklahoma and like Texas every now and then, of course. But Georgia would be dealing with Florida, Alabama, Auburn, and then, maybe like a Kentucky. Of course, we name them as a dark horse every now and then. But I think the pods is the best way to go about it if I were to make the decision.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to the pods. I would much rather just see divisions just going in general.
That's not a bad idea either.
I mean, just every team has 2 permanent rivals. And then you just structure the way in which the entire conference plays each other within a span of 2 years, and every team visits every stadium within a span of 4 years, with the exception of Georgia and Florida. We're not going to go to Ben Hill Griffin, and they're not going to have the same.
Yeah, exactly.
But everyone else will pretty much play in every stadium in the SEC in the span of 4 years. Just structure it like that.
Yeah. So if you structured it like that, so you like out of the 16 teams, you're one of them, so that leaves 15 on there, and you make 2 permanent rivals on there, which puts you down to 13 for the rest of it. So you could play like, to do it though at that point this is where it becomes like, is the SEC trying to completely break off from everything else? Because at that point, do you play 9 SEC games? Do you play 8 SEC games? Exactly.
And you go to 9 with that many teams.
You go to 9 SEC games at that point, or maybe even 10, like at that point. Maybe they try to just speed like the process of the teams cycling through and stuff like that. And I don't know how they would necessarily go about it. They'd have to figure that out. Maybe they would do 1 permanent like rival from the other side, like the same kind of thing that it is, right now. Let's say like a Georgia versus Auburn, because they play every year as,
I know one
Deep South's oldest rivalry. Like that.
This was first brought up back when we still just had 14 teams, and that was just going to be the future. For Georgia, it was Tennessee, Florida, and Carolina. Then you look at that like, you'd hate to not play Tennessee every year, but then you see, we'll play them every other year. It's still a rivalry, and I just hate the fact that Texas A&M joined the conference in 2012. We didn't play them until 2019.
Yeah.
Like we barely play those teams unless we win the East and they win the West.
Well, because the current format, you don't play them for
forever and ever.
Yeah.
It's not even home and home anymore.
It takes a really long time to get them on your schedule, and and then COVID stuff happens and they shift your schedule around anyways. And so then we didn't play, or we played Arkansas last year when we weren't supposed to.
Ole Miss, I believe.
We were supposed to play Ole Miss. Ended up playing Arkansas, and we play Arkansas again this year. So we play them twice in a row now.
And it's been since 2016 since we played Ole Miss. So then it'll be probably theoretically maybe next year we play Ole Miss. So that's 6 years since we played Ole Miss.
Which is the part that doesn't make sense, because like why wouldn't we just throw Ole Miss on our schedule this year instead of Arkansas a second time? Like, which that whole thing was crazy too. I don't know why they decided to shift up the schedule as far as the way the SEC works too much more. Like as far as the West teams, like that to me it didn't make sense to do that. But it Florida didn't have to play against Alabama because of that. That was the change. We kind of shifted stuff around, and Florida dodged having to add Alabama to their schedule.
And instead, Georgia added Alabama.
Well, Georgia
already had Alabama, which is why I'm pretty sure it was going to be Florida that was going to have to play Alabama based on like that. That's kind of why they shifted stuff around.
Yeah, because Florida played Bama this year, I believe. So.
And I'm pretty sure they were going to play them last year. We were supposed to play them last year.
Yeah, because that was the thought. Everyone would just get their 2021 opponents in 2020. That's what they.
Which I mean, we got Arkansas. We did get Arkansas. You know, we shifted that around, but we didn't. I don't know. So we'll see how it goes. And at that point is when, once again, if you start doing it like that, you start eliminating the number of games they're playing versus out of conference teams even further than it's already gotten. Like, I mean, right now, I guess technically it's not that big of a deal for like the grand scheme of it, because right now we play 4 out of conference games, with 2 of them being like FCS teams and 1 being like Georgia Tech. So then we add 1 other like, bigger name, like hence we're playing Clemson to start the season. And like, if you look through we talked about this, one of our last episodes was, the schedule that had stacked up for Georgia out of conference over the next decade, which ironically, Texas and Oklahoma were on those schedules for Georgia a few times in that spot. So which kind of makes you, look back and say, yeah, they've probably been working on this stuff, to be honest with you. They don't even have to mix up the schedule too much later on. And they've already added those games to our schedules. So that's what you start looking at, like, how are they going to do all of it at this point? And you wonder if it's going to completely pull away from like the way college football is as a whole. It'll be a while before it does it, but also at the same time, I don't think this is all they add. I think if they are going to go that way and they do want to kind of completely branch away, it's just a matter of time before 2 more teams are announced to join the conference. And then all of a sudden it's 18 instead of 16. And then it goes up to 20. And then at that point they've got where, hey, there's 20 on, we can put a full season together and just play ourselves without playing anybody outside except the random games that you want to keep alive for argument's sake of like, Georgia versus Georgia Tech and stuff like that. That's just your rivals that people really like to see at this point. The fans really have gotten attached to. So at that point, they kind of pull away from it. And then what you have, a semi-pro team or a semi-pro league or like something completely separate from the NCAA, which the NCAA, to be quite honest, we've talked about this as well. They're just a name at this point. They don't do anything. They don't even govern anything at this point to like control the teams that are in there. There's no point in them in the equation either, but it is a slippery slope when you start trying to pull away from it as a whole, as far as like what college football is that we enjoy watching today. That's the concern as a college football fan. We talked about this when they expanded the playoffs, as far as like, I'm concerned for college football as a whole. I'm concerned for college football as a whole with this move, because it makes you wonder how long it is before they completely branch away from the rest of the NCAA and just say, hey, this is just our league. We have our own league. We're just going to do this. Y'all have fun over there doing, you'll have Clemson out there right now. Nobody else, though. You took Clemson, Georgia, Alabama, Oklahoma. I'll say Notre Dame just because of the way their stuff is set up. They always are in the ending conversation. So basically, like when you start pulling out teams like that have been right there, and then you can keep going down the list of the SEC teams, like Florida was in the equation last year, Texas A&M was in the equation last year. You have all this stuff on there, and so that leaves, you keep Clemson and Notre Dame. Good luck. Notre Dame's not good. They're always there because they don't structure their schedule like, against good opponents all year. So they have a perfect schedule. and a perfect
Well-
record 9 times out of 10,
Well,
and then they get
when
just
that
ran down.
changes and how they join the ACC, they're forced to play some tough schedules every now and then.
Yeah.
When they are put into the ACC, because I think that's also a matter of time. I think that's kind of like why it happened last
Right
year.
now, they already played 7 ACC games.
Yeah.
A year. And the ACC kind of determines their schedules.
Yeah.
In a sense,
that-
yeah. At this point,
that's
they've kind of bled towards that. But I mean, at the same time, like unless they're playing Clemson, the ACC is, the same level at that point as talking about like the Vanderbilt and the Tennessee right now kind of thing. Like they don't have anybody else. They're outside of last year because of Notre Dame joining, their conference champion opponent for Clemson has been a 7-5 team. Like at the end of the season, that's their conference champion opponent.
Well, that should change this year.
Yeah. It should.
It should change this year with UNC.
Yeah, hopefully.
UNC, I do like UNC, and I think that they're going to be good as well. So we'll see. I like what they've put together out there, and hopefully that adds a little bit. We talk about parity across like college football. Hopefully that'll add a little bit to the ACC in the sense of somebody else could put a good team up over there. And everyone always tries to talk about the SEC and Bama being the only team, but there's a reason that several other SEC teams are always in the conversation at the end of the year for the playoff spot. And it's always a question of, are they going to put multiple SEC teams in the playoffs this year? They're never asking, is there going to be multiple ACC teams in the playoff this year?
Because
you can't count last year. You cannot
crapshoot, man. I mean, last year they were saying like, oh, Miami has Arik King now at quarterback. They could be someone that really challenges Clemson. And then you have UNC with Sam Howell over there. But it seems like every year they say those things and they set these like unprecedented predictions for these teams. They're going to be really good this year. Like Mac Brown's doing really good things, which he is. He's recruiting at a pretty good level for UNC right now. And then Miami down there, Manny Diaz is doing some good things for Miami right now. But they really don't even hold up to anything against Clemson. Whereas like Georgia is at least up there with Alabama as in regards to like the talent that they put on the field and whenever they play each other. They're at least up there. Whereas like if Clemson were to play UNC in Miami, do we really even believe that those games would be even close right now? I don't think that they would really be close right now. And that's just me talking before the season even starts. But there's multiple teams right now that you could say could probably play at Alabama pretty competitively right now in the SEC. Georgia probably could. Texas A&M probably could. And then LSU maybe you could throw in there as well. But as regards to the ACC, there's just nobody that stands up to the pedestal that Clemson does right now. And that's because Dabo Swinney just cleans it up over there. And he does a good job at just establishing his team every single year to where nobody – like if you're competing against other ACC teams, who are you going to choose? You're going to choose Dabo Swinney or are you going to choose Manny Diaz? Like that's who you're competing against right now. But
yeah, I will say, to be fair, I think UNC could be competitive against Clemson. I'm not saying that they would win or be like within one score by the end of the game, but I do think that like they could go in and be competitive to the point where you wouldn't say, all right, they just got like just boat raced or something like that necessarily. Clemson, I don't think they have a chance to beat them.
Could you
don't
say
get me wrong.
confidently?
I can say confidently. I wouldn't say they would beat them confidently. That's what I'm saying. It's like I would say they'd probably lose by multiple scores at the end of the game, but that would be a team that like early on, maybe through the first half, maybe even through the third quarter, like they could at least be like where you're looking like they have a chance to make a shot. They just have to do something here, or else they're going to run out of time, kind of thing. Miami, they would just get destroyed like that. Miami wouldn't have any chance against Clemson right now. Especially with Arik King being out still. After he tore his ACL, like they definitely wouldn't have a chance, but UNC would be the best bet to say it. As you said, though, in the SEC, there's definitely a few teams that would stand toe-to-toe with Bama. Now, once again, not all of them would be within one score by the end of the game either.
No.
But in the same way that I'm saying that UNC could be in the game for a long point in time before it's pulled away, it could be the same thing with like a Bama versus, multiple teams. Texas A&M definitely going into the last year before they changed the schedule and how it was all working. Texas A&M was a team to watch before the season started, and then they really just had the roughest schedule in the past couple seasons too.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it was. I think it was the year before last where they were. They had like the toughest schedule.
They played Clemson.
They played.
Who else did they play?
Clemson, Bama, Georgia.
They had a lot of tough road games. Yeah, they played at UGA.
They played 4 of the top 5 teams like late in this league. By the end of the season, they had played like 4 of the top 5 teams, I believe. It was some ridiculous stat like that. And yeah, so they didn't have a great chance. They pretty much won every other game except the games that were like against the top 5 opponents.
Yeah.
And so at that point, they had lost 4 or 5. I think it was 4 games. They ended up losing 4 games. I think I'll have to go back and look, or somebody can fact check me on it. I think they went somewhere around 8-4, not last year, but the year before. And they were all against teams like it was Bama, Clemson, and Georgia were 3 of them. I know. I remember that part. And I think there was a 4th one in there somewhere.
LSU. And
they played LSU, and that was the LSU national championship team.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was it. It was LSU, and it was the national championship LSU Tigers. Yeah. So we know how that went. So that was their 4 losses. I mean, that wasn't really fair as far as like counting them as not being a competitive team. Hence, then we saw how the season went last year, and they went toe to toe with the entire conference at that point. That's why they were on the brink of being in the playoff last year. So they're a team to watch. That I do think that they could go toe to toe with Bama, and not saying they win, because I don't know who beats Bama, any year. We always get to that. That's always the question. Who's going to beat Bama this year? Can somebody beat Bama this year?
It's one of those things you can't say until it happens, really.
Yeah, like I'm not going to sit here and say somebody's going to beat Bama, because we have to wait and see. Somebody's got to prove that they can beat Bama at this point. I'm talking about Georgia, too. Georgia has to prove they can beat Bama. At this point, that's the narrative. Can they beat Big Brother? Can they get over the hump? All that good stuff. So we have to wait and see. I think Bama can be beaten by Georgia. I think they can be beaten by Texas A&M. I don't know that either of those teams necessarily do it this year, but they can. It's football. It's you lay the right punch in and you knock somebody out.
Throw a shoe.
Yeah, I mean, ask Ole Miss.
I mean, exactly. And Ole Miss wasn't even really in the conversation at all overall, but they went toe to toe and they just went in a shootout with Alabama. That's how that happened. And they almost won that game. They should have won that game.
I mean, back in 14 and 15 when they did
beat Alabama. Yeah. Well, I was talking about recent too, where they went toe to toe and like they probably should have won that game. But yeah,
it's also because Lane Kiffin is just an absolute offensive mastermind. And
I mean, when you score 50 points, you could beat anybody.
Yeah, I mean, they were slinging it around that Alabama defense that game.
Too bad Lane Kiffin didn't have any type of defense. Yeah, any type of defense, they would have been able to.
But he gets one though. Ole Miss will definitely be in the same position that Texas A&M is in right now, I believe.
Ole Miss they could make their name known this year, I think, too. So
no, it's like clockwork. As soon as Ole Miss starts to win 10 games, NCAA is going to come in and punish them for something.
They'll come get Lane. They'll come catch him with something and kick him out there.
It'll be like last time. Some player will be getting paid, and player will say that 2 other schools paid him, but the NCAA is not going to. Looking at those schools.
I said this already. Let's not go down that road. The NCAA doesn't do anything to anyone at all, except Ole Miss. I mean, but not really.
There's stuff
they didn't really do that though. Like Ole Miss did it to themselves. It was self-sanctions.
I mean, stuff came out today about Nebraska, about them facing some stuff because they were doing illegal practices during COVID. So we'll see if anything happens with that. I mean, I don't know.
Those jerseys are real.
Yeah, those jerseys are horrendous. If they walk out on this field, they definitely should be punished.
The overall ones?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my god.
Jeez.
That one's really bad. Yeah. No, that one's rough. But I mean,
troll.
I mean, it probably is, but like at the same time, like, is it? We'll see. If they walk out there in those uniforms, that's just rough.
I think it's almost more impressive that someone can come up with a jersey that bad more than it is for someone to come with a really good jersey.
I mean, someone did come up with this brown Florida jersey.
Years ago. The gator skin ones.
Those are rough.
Absolutely terrible.
Those are rough. Yeah, not good. I mean, it's Florida uniforms in general. The color combination is just disgusting.
Yeah.
So you don't have that much to work with. But that was probably the worst. That was
by far.
But anyways, we'll let that kind of wrap. We talked a long time about like this, and we'll talk about this for a long time again, because it is something that's going to develop as we go on. It'll be one of those things that every couple weeks or month or so, like something's probably going to be mentioned about it, and it kind of brings the conversation up again. So we will not be done with that by the slightest, but we will go ahead and jump over to our next part. I kind of combined the two. We were going to talk about a little bit about like the Arik Gilbert stuff going on and just how people treated him in the media and just fans and everything as a whole on there. But I'll kind of use that as part of the conversation that we get into with the injuries as a whole, because it's just another name that's not with the team right now. and it kind of plays into it. But I'm going to go ahead and read the list right now of players that are injured, after fall camp right now. And you've got Jermaine Burton, Kyrus Jackson, Dominic Blaylock, George Pickens, John Fitzpatrick, Jalen Kimber, Owen Condon, Warren Erickson, Darnell Washington, and Tyke Smith. This is all going. Now, some of those names will be ready to play by the Clemson game. Let me make that clear.
Yes.
Not all of those names are not going to be playing by the Clemson game, but that is the current list of injured Georgia players right now, with the biggest being the ones that came out today, with Darnell Washington and Tyke Smith both having surgery on their foot from a broken bone in their foot.
And chances of them playing Clemson are like slim to none. Although Kirby did say today it's a day-to-day type deal. More than likely
there's no way they're playing in 2 weeks. If they had to have surgery on something that broke in their foot, there's no way they play in 2 weeks.
No.
Nor do they want to push that.
It is possible. It is possible.
I don't know what kind of surgery it was, how
we don't know
the surgery was, what bone was broken. We don't know any of that. I'm not gonna.
It very well is possible, but just from the outside looking in, not really knowing a whole lot, of course, just because Kirby keeps those things very close to the program, I would venture to say you probably do not see either of them in the Clemson game.
I'd say the odds are not in our favor on that, or Georgia's favor on that. And I'll say that, the fact that Kirby came out and said they're day-to-day on there, that's the most Kirby thing that I've heard.
Plus, you don't want to go out right and tell Dabo Swinney and Clemson, hey, Darnell Washington, Tyke Smith, they're not playing. You don't want to go ahead and just throw that out.
That's my point. And that's why he's keeping it close to chest, in the sense that he's not going to come out and just say, hey, by the way, Clemson, you've got 2 weeks to prepare, and you don't have to worry about Darnell Washington or Tyke Smith.
Yeah. He's
not going to tell them that. That's why he came out and said day-to-day.
Exactly.
Now, I would be surprised to see anything broken. You expect a few weeks, in general, and the fact that we are 2 weeks out from this game, 2.5 weeks out from this game, is why I say it's a very slim to none type chance that they're on the field. Now, they could be. We've put people out there, that weren't 100% recovered for several different times, or at several different times, and they end up. They could be a decoy kind of thing at that point if they do step on the field. I will say that if they get out there at all, I would probably not expect them to do a ton out there on the field. At least when I say that, I'm more speaking about the offensive side with Darnell, because you don't really put a defensive guy as a a decoy. You need him to be covering somebody else, not
especially
being
with
a decoy.
Tyke Smith, who would be covering Justin Ross more than likely,
playing the slot defender, or slot receiver, a lot of tight ends, the bigger people in the middle. You're going to need somebody playing that position that can be 100%, and so that one's going to be less likely on there but. Without Darnell Washington, who showed a lot of improvement, in the sense that we were seeing him really be able to be used in different ways towards the end of last year, where we were thinking, hey, he's going to be a lot more of a catching threat, a lot more of getting the ball in his hands, see what he can do, all of that kind of stuff. And we're still going to see that this year. We'll still get the chance. When I say that, I don't expect to see them playing against Clemson at this point, just because, anything broken just makes me super weary on that. I'm not going to sit here and just be you never know. We can do it.
Plus, here's the thing. If we're being honest, Georgia does not have to beat Clemson. If they lose to Clemson, nothing changes for them. So I think it's just one of those situations where, especially if you're Kirby, you would rather them not play against Clemson, and that lessen your chances of beating Clemson, and then take the long road to where they're 100% healthy for the rest of your conference play, where you absolutely will need them, because if you do lose, you have to win out. And you'd rather have them all right, we'll throw you in for this one game, and then, something else happens, then that could lengthen the time that they're off the field. So that's why I just think it's one of those things where they're probably not going to play, just because they don't have to play in this game necessarily.
I would agree with you on that, and we talked about that before, and I said that, theoretically, they could lose. Georgia could lose to Clemson week 1. That's something I've said since, last year, when we saw this on the schedule to start the season. This is something I've been talking about with that. They don't have to win that game at all. It doesn't impact our ability to get to Atlanta. And if it doesn't impact our ability to get to Atlanta in December, that means it does not kill our chances at a playoff spot.
Yeah.
As long as we can get into Atlanta, then we are okay. We could theoretically lose to Clemson, and then Georgia could still lose another game randomly throughout the SEC, as long as they still won the East, because that would give them the chance to go play against a Bama or whoever represents the West at that point. And as long as they win that game, the SEC will have their conference champion in the playoffs. Now it puts it to where I don't want to go into the Bama, like playing against, say, Bama with 2 losses. We've been down that road. Like I don't want to go down that road playing against Bama in the SEC championship where you have to win to even really be able to make the argument. Because at that point you couldn't lose. You wouldn't even remotely be talked about making it at that, or people would talk about it. They always would talk about it, but you wouldn't have an actual chance of making it if you had 3 losses at that point. But you could lose a regular season game as long as it doesn't keep you from getting to Atlanta.
Yep.
You could slip up to somebody as long as you can still get to Atlanta, even if you lose to Clemson beforehand. So Georgia fans, don't get like super scared going into the Clemson game saying we got this whole list of players that aren't playing because of injury and we have to win the game. I mean, you want to. You don't want to lose to Clemson. That's not at all what you want. So it's must win in the sense of like an argument's sake for fans, for me, for you, in that sense of having to tolerate other people. Just in the SEC alone, think about Florida fans, how they're going to be talking like, yeah, we don't want to deal with that as fans. But as the season goes, Kirby wants to win that game. But if they lose that game, I promise you that he will still be just as focused going in the rest of the season with just as much of a chance to make the playoffs after it. So, yeah, maybe we don't have these big guys in the first week of the season against Clemson. We'll be okay.
But here's another thing that you can look forward to is that more than likely, if Georgia is going to win a national championship this year, you're going to have to play Clemson twice more than likely. I would venture to say, because Clemson is going to be in the college football playoff, especially if they beat Georgia week 1. Their road to the national championship after Georgia is easy pickings. I mean, after that, for them, it's an easy road. So
essentially,
that's the bright side.
Yeah.
If you do lose to them week 1, you'll get another shot at them probably in the college football playoff. And so you'll get another shot at them, Georgia fans. Like, don't worry. Like, if you lose week 1, you will have your attempt to get your revenge against Clemson. So, and if you do, so you're gonna have to either beat them twice or you'll get to play them again anyways. So it really does. It's like, don't worry about all of that, and it's really not that big of a deal.
It's preseason. We haven't seen anybody play a game yet. We don't know. Yeah, Clemson came off of a playoff appearance at this point, national championship appearance kind of thing, or not a national championship, like a playoff appearance. They lost in the first round to Ohio State, but yeah, they're coming off of that. They're also rebuilding a lot as well. You know, there's a lot of changes in their offense. There's a lot of people that are gone. They have some, they're always going to have a good quarterback. That's just, they recruit well there. That's what they have. They have good running back. They have a great wide receiver. They have a pretty good defense overall as well. And so, like, they're going to be a good team, but we haven't seen them play. It's also their first game of the season, and they have to go against Georgia. Even if we do have injuries, it's still not just a cakewalk for anybody without, like, you're still going to have to show up and play as hard as possible. And while I'm saying about show up and play on there, one just narrative that really drives me nuts, and then we'll get into a little bit of Arik Gilbert stuff. People really still say Georgia better make sure that the guys get in there motivated, ready to play that game. If you've ever played a competitive sport, like I'll even say at a high school level, where you played on a high school team and you were playing for, trying to get to playoffs or the state championship or whatever it was, do you ever go up against an opponent like a Clemson or something like that, like the top dog of who you're supposed to play, while you're also a good team and knowing that you are very capable of beating that team if y'all put the effort and stuff in on there? Do you ever think there's somebody that's going to walk into that game not motivated? Yeah. I don't think there is the walk-on, backup, bench warmer is going to be motivated for that game.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to do anything to make sure that team is motivated to play against Clemson. Mm-hmm. If they need any type of motivation to play against Clemson, they don't need to be on the field.
No.
Like, what motivation what do you want Kirby to do to make them either they're motivated or they're not? Kirby can't do anything to make that's a mental decision that you have as a person, as an individual. And if you don't have the motivation going into one of the top 4 teams from last year, a playoff team, to start your season, and you're not motivated for that game, you shouldn't be playing a competitive sport for a championship. What are you doing it for?
Mm-hmm.
I want to get back to the on-field part. At least with Takee Smith, let's keep in mind that he did not participate in spring. Like, Georgia worked the different players in that spot all spring, including Adam Anderson, who we know is going to play a lot more against Clemson now if Smith does not play.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we're prepared to not have him. We didn't have him up. We had him in fall camp, obviously, but fall camp is only a couple weeks. Like, it's not a lot of time for them to fill in that spot. So like a lot of people have been preparing for it. That's not the. I mean, it's a big hit because the guy was an All-American. You don't want to lose him and not have him. So like you want him on the field to play that game. But you can also get past that. The biggest thing is Darnell Washington on offense. We've already got a lot of injuries at the wide receiver position. Now, once again, I think quite a few of these guys that are on that list are going to be okay to play in that first game. I'm not going to sit here and just list off a bunch of people. I mean, but everybody knows like the people that have been hurt, like the serious injuries, you're not going to have. There's quite a few that you're like, they could very well or most likely are going to be on the field for that game and playing pretty aggressively in that game. So we'll have a lot of weapons. Never forget that we still have JT Daniels, and there's still a ridiculous amount of like horses in the stable at running back. Like, I mean, it's unreal the amount of talent we're going to have coming out of the backfield.
And you never know what kind of freshman season Brock Bowers is about to have.
Yeah, or the type of season that Justin Robinson's going to have, or the type of season that Adonai Mitchell is going to have.
I mean, for all we know, Brock Bowers could be primed for a freshman All-American season.
Very well could.
You just never know.
Something like Washington not being there for a big game like this, and he has a chance to step. That's how a kid makes the freshman All-American team.
Yep.
That's the kind of situation that you want to be able to do that. And there has been a lot of talk about him in camp, in spring leading up to this point.
There's been a lot of talk about all those guys in the receiver room.
A.D. Mitchell has been one of the people. He really stepped out in the spring. We all saw it. If you watched the spring game stuff, you saw it too. You saw what he was doing. Justin Robinson, a lot of stuff surfaced about him and what he was doing. We have a lot of talent.
Especially when you have an offense of what Todd Monken is going to run and a quarterback like JT Daniels. Like, Georgia has the talent at receiver to get the job done. So offense really shouldn't even be the worry, in my opinion. Like or in other words, it's going to be okay, is what I'm trying to say. Like, there's just a lot of things that you don't know, but there's also some things that you do know that should put confidence in you to trust these other guys if other injuries happen, or already with the injuries that have already happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when you're looking at once again, the main names that I won't include Darnell Washington in this again because we just kind of covered as far as his likelihood and stuff. But Jermaine Burton, Kearis Jackson, and Dominique Blaylock, all three of those guys,
they're playing.
They're all playing.
Dominic Blaylock, I don't know,
legitimately.
Maybe, but yeah,
Blaylock is the one that's like, I don't see a scenario where Jermaine Burton and Kearis Jackson aren't on the field against Clemson.
No, yeah, they'll be out there.
Jermaine Burton's is a freaking baller. Kearis Jackson is also a very reliable. I think he's a baller too. Like he's not going to be your biggest name out there, but he's very consistent. He's very reliable. And when a third down situation comes up, he's somebody is a very good target to look for on the field. He's really good about going over the middle of the field for us. And when you don't have a guy like, say, Darnell Washington out there, he's going to really help you out. Yeah. That we're going to have enough targets for JT Daniels to be able to make up for the fact that these guys might not be on the field. And once again, it's too early to make a prediction on stuff. We're going to wait and see how stuff plays out the rest of it. We'll obviously give predictions for the Clemson game the week before, and we'll dive into a lot more of what we're looking at as a comparison going into that game as well. But I mean, it's way too soon to sit here and just say, all right, well, screwed. Georgia has no chance of beating Clemson. You might as well go ahead and mark that as an L and move on. They've still got there's a reason Georgia has been in the top 3 in recruiting classes almost every single year with Kirby Smart. There's a lot of talent on that team. There's somebody to step up in that position to take over. And no, they may not be as good as the starter, but there's not a drastic drop off from ones and twos for the most part on Georgia's roster. There's going to be a few guys that, of course there is, because they're like number 1 draft pick type guys. So that's not really fair. But for the majority of them, there's somebody that's right behind them that is dang good and that's real close to being the starter in general, or could start several other places, just can't because of who's in front of them. Yep. There's a lot of talent. Don't get panicked on it and don't freak out about it. But, I mean, I'll let y'all, before we jump into the Arik Gilbert stuff at all, to wrap it, any other comments or concerns or anything about what we've talked about so far?
No,
nothing that I can add on. All I could say is also, he is listed on that list, I think. John Fitzpatrick is also not a name to forget. We saw him have some flashes against Cincinnati right before the season ended. So I think with him and Brock Bowers, if Darnell were to not play, I think tight end we'll be completely fine at.
He's the most for a gettable tight end, but defenses also tend to forget about him too.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Exactly.
He's a big play guy, like just waiting to happen because of he'll slip through the defense and just there's once again when you have think about like last year at different times, like when you had a Pickens, a Darnell Washington, a Jermaine Burton, and guys like that on the field, and then you have John Fitzpatrick out there as a defense. Yeah, he's not your number one concern, but at the same time, you still got to pay attention to him, and if they don't, he slips by, and he's one that you'll see just go up the seam randomly and just be wide open over
that
like,
one
just down
big
the
play
seam.
when you need it.
30 yards downfield because the two outside receivers were a lot bigger of a threat, and so the defense just opens up like this. The middle linebackers go out with a running back or something like that, and all of a sudden you just see John Fitzpatrick just down the middle, right down the seam, just 20, 30 yards down the field, just with space to run. He catches and runs with it at that point. That's the kind of stuff you see from him because people do underestimate him. He's still good. He does a really good job in like the blocking and run game and stuff like that for us. And that's where he earns his playing time a lot. But he's still a threat to make a play, with his hands as well. So That's also a really good point not to sleep on. Georgia has the tight end room is pretty thick in general.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a lot of dudes. So don't be that concerned as a whole. I mean, you don't want to see Darnell go down. Nobody does. Georgia's going to be all right as a whole.
Yep.
You can't count them out. It's too early for that. But we'll jump into the last little bit, and just because of the way people handled it, you got to talk about it and just the situation as a whole with Arik Gilbert. We're not going to speculate on anything going on with him, any of the stuff that actually happened with it. This is more or less going to be a segment just so we can just talk about the ridiculous rumors and stuff that did spread about what was happening. There's so many different things that were so left and right, like back and forth, like so far away from each other, but like the rumors just spread because nobody knew. Nobody actually had the answer for it. So what do people do? They make stuff up about it. And they try to like drive the narrative for clicks and stuff like that, or just even fans just want to say it because they're like, I heard this, and just kind of gets attention. But Jonathan, I'll jump over to you because you were you texted us right after all the stuff was going on. You're like, I could talk for 45 minutes about the stuff going on with him right now. So I'll let you start. I'll give you the floor, and we'll take up after.
Man, I was fired up. I was ready to go on a Brooks Austin MBR stint. That's what I was ready to do, just because, it was tweet after tweet after tweet. It was just something negative aimed towards the kid. And I think Brooks, which you should go watch Brooks's MBR show that he recorded this week, and he talks about Arik Gilbert in the very beginning of the show. Everybody should go watch that because he spoke it perfectly about how people should take these situations, and all you need to do is you just need to support. You just need to support the kid, respect his decision, and hope he gets better. And so it was just, but he pointed out, like, what was really surprising is that, like, when Scott Cochran, when that got out, that he was stepping away from the program, everybody was being supportive of him. Heck, even rival fan bases were like, man, we really hope Coach Cochran will get better. We hope that his situation gets better. We hope he does. Hopefully he's back with the team soon. But then when a 19-year-old kid needs to step away from the program because he's dealing with some off-the-field issues with himself, all of a sudden it's a problem, or the kid's a drama queen. The kid's a problem. The kid's a cancer with the team. He doesn't care about football. He doesn't care about UGA. Bye-bye, Arik Gilbert. He's going to the transfer portal. What a waste of a talent. And for no reason at all. You're talking about a 19-year-old kid. These are not just football players. They put a product on the field for you because they are very talented, and you're talking about a very generational talent in Arik Gilbert. But they are also human beings. We all deal with things in our lives that we don't necessarily want to talk about, and things that we have to step away from things sometimes to go and deal with. And that's okay. That's part of being a person. That's part of being a human being in this world. So these athletes are no different. They have to deal with things too and you're not entitled to any information about what they're dealing with. I'm not entitled to it. None of us are entitled to it. No insider isn't entitled to know the information. Arik Gilbert gets to know that information and deal with it on his own. And there are people in the organization who are helping him through that. And I have confidence that they will get him okay. That'll get him right, and he'll be able to step back into the program when he is ready. When is that? I don't know, and it doesn't even matter, because all that matters is that Arik Gilbert handles himself the way that he wants to, and gets his mindset back to where he wants it to be, to where he is ready to get to come back to the football program. That's all I gotta say.
That was a good one.
I'll add this, and I'll give a little speculation. It's not negative about Gilbert. It's kind of more negative about society itself. I'm in a unique position from y'all, just from my job, I'm around these kinds of kids like all the time. Particular guy like Malachi Starks, 5-star recruit, top 20, 24/7 sports. I mean, he's a senior in high school. I don't even think he's 18 years old yet. He might be. Been a big deal at Jefferson High School since he was an 8th grader. 2,000 followers on Twitter already at that age. Now you take a guy like Arik Gilbert, who is from Marietta. Is that correct?
Yes.
Larger community, larger county, larger part of the state.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of attention this guy's been getting since he was 14 years old, if not younger, that's a lot on a kid.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it's hard to block all that out. You know, when you're seeing it on Twitter, Instagram, kids don't really use Facebook as much these days, but he probably sees it through his parents. I do think that probably has a lot to do with what he's going through right now. I mean, he is still a kid. I don't think Gilbert is 20 yet.
No, he's 19 still, I believe.
I mean, he is a kid with 14,000 followers on Twitter. He's a kid that is under a microscope that people his age should not be under. And on top of that, he has to play football. He has to go to class, keep up a good GPA. And also in the back of his mind, you know, he also has his family. You know, we just got out of we still are in the pandemic. So he has to worry about all that. It's a big reason why he decided to leave LSU and come back home to Georgia. It says a lot. It's just very negative to say about where we are right now with social media. That we just dissect these 19, 20, and 21-year-old kids.
Well, to add to that, and like how it is, a lot of people forget too, like back in the day in general, like before social media was the way that it is, and it was very different for stars and these, especially kids in college age like this that aren't used to, like, yeah, they're used to being famous even like 20 years ago. Like, yeah, they're famous in their town, in their, you know, area. And if they're on a big team that's winning a lot and stuff, yeah, like the national media will pay attention to them and stuff. But all you had to do to ignore that stuff was turn off your TV, you know, not pay attention to like the news, not pay attention to like ESPN or something like that, like, and just kind of let it go in that way of it. Now, you can't get away unless you just stay off social media entirely, which is at this point for the newer generation coming up, like my generation, your generation. Social media, everyone's on social media a lot. That's how people connect with everybody. That's how you literally socialize. That's the whole point of like the term social media. It's how people communicate. It's how you get to know people from all over the place. And it becomes a very important piece of your life. So people don't just turn it down. People do end up because they can't take it. You see that sometimes. But it's really hard to shut out the noise at this point. And it's really easy for people to pick up and pay attention to you. And once again, this is like kind of speculation in it, and it's not saying that this is what's happening on it. But theoretically, let's say that he's having mental health issues. Say it is mental health, right? Which wouldn't be a crazy thing to think that it could potentially be that he's struggling with just his mental health on it. Because think about everything that the kid's gone through in the last year in general, with everything like between being at LSU and all the talks about him having issues there, not wanting to be away from home was part of stuff that people talked about. He transferred into Florida to immediately leave Florida and go somewhere else. And so now then he ended up at Georgia. And so everyone, think like LSU fans are super focused on him. Georgia fans super focused on him. LSU fans super focused on him. The kid was extremely high recruit out of high school and stuff too. So like the national media was already paying attention to him. Hence the reason he's still got as many fans or followers and stuff on social media that he has. He has been flooded with it. It's not crazy to think that all of that could have gotten to him. All of the fans, all of you listening, you watching, us in the room, like other people just speculating on stuff going on in his life for the last year that he's been talking about this stuff in general. So much of his life has been just blasted everywhere. So much of like the stuff that he's been going through has already been published everywhere, and all he does is hear people talk about like the mistakes he's made. You don't think that would start to bother a young man and like his mental state that potentially cause issues on it? And then you start saying that is what is going on, right? You know what doesn't help? It doesn't help to sit here as the fans of the team that he plays for, to sit here and just throw all kinds of wild stuff out there and just make up stories because you think could be true. You don't know. Maybe he's a problem child dealing with all this stuff and he's just bringing issues over. There was speculation of drug issues. There was speculation of him cussing out Kirby Smart. There was speculation of him having a kid that's very sick that he's dealing with and he doesn't even have a kid. Like all of this kind of stuff, that's going to make it worse if he's dealing with mental health. So as Brooks Austin said, it doesn't matter. Stop speculating. Stop making stuff up. Leave the kid alone. Give him some privacy. We've gotten to a day and age where people really feel like because you are famous, you are not allowed to have any type of privacy in your own life, and that's bullcrap. They're still allowed to have privacy in their own personal life. They don't have to have their entire life on blast. And if it is something going on with this kid to where he is away from the team right before the season starts, one, that's very serious. Number two, if the head coach of that football team looks at the media and announces something and says, hey, something's going on with the kid, he's still a part of this team. He's just stepped away from the team for right now. We're praying for him. We support whatever he's got going on right now, and he will be back with the team. Leave it alone. Don't speculate on something, and don't sit here and call this kid a problem child because, once again, and this will be the last thing I quote from Brooks Austin real quick, is, well, you're wearing the film guy shirt. So
yeah, shout out to our guy.
Shout out to the film guy over here.
Shout out to boy Brooks.
But to the last quote of it is, he's not a problem child. He's a young man dealing with a problem, and you don't need to know what it is. Doesn't matter. His head coach is okay with the fact that he's had to step away, and he's going to welcome him back once he's okay with whatever it is. That means you do not need to speculate, and that means you do not need to sit here and start judging him and say it's probably because of this or it's probably because of that. I bet he's got an issue with this. Stop. Leave it alone. Just for once, let's, as a community around him, understand that he's still a young man. Like you said, 19 years old. He needs some privacy. He's still got – how would you like everything that you've ever done in your life to just be blasted everywhere? I've done stuff that I don't want everybody to know about. I'm sure everybody else in this room has also done things they wouldn't want the entire world to know about. And that would probably be not great if the entire media just blew it up and published it everywhere.
And that was the issue with me, really. And it wasn't even really the fans, because everybody knows what to expect from fans, really. I mean, you're going to have your trolls, you're going to have whatever, especially on a site like Twitter. It was the people with blue check marks, the people with website credentials, right, covering the team, people who are supposed to have inside information on the team, who were the ones speculating about it, who were the ones spreading rumors. Like, all of a sudden, because this one person with a blue check mark, it was like, oh yeah, well, that's because Arik Gilbert cussed out one of the coaches. And then all of a sudden, everybody's just running with it. Like, oh yeah, that's why he's not with the team. Like, see, he's a team cancer. That's what I really had an issue with.
That's what made it all blow up.
Yeah, you're talking about putting a kid under a microscope. It was the people with thousands of followers, people who everybody turns their attention to when like big breaking news happens in college football. That's who they turn to get their information. That's what I really had the issue with, because especially me, someone who is going to school right now to become a sports journalist and someone who already does write sports articles, that was a big issue for me to see that some people wanted to just put those things in their article because why? As we talked about earlier, clicks, that equals money. And it was just, it really hurt me to see that that's where people went to in a situation like this, is they took the angle of, how can I turn this into clicks on my website? How can I turn this into get people to click on my article? And it's ridiculous, man. It is absolutely ridiculous.
How can it make me money? If you're watching, you saw me make the hand gesture there, the Johnny Manziel, real quick. Everything, just like we said, when it comes to the SEC and like the expansions, all that kind of stuff, every decision, everything like that comes to money. And they're getting more clicks on their website because of it. And I think that what I will say, and the reason we talk about it like this, is we all are associated with Dogs Daily on Sports Illustrated. That's kind of what, hence the title of the show. If you're listening to this, you listen to the intro. That's what it says in our intro, and it talks about that. So I can't say anything better than like the way our group, our organization handled it on it. Like when Brooks wrote an article on the Gilbert situation, like he literally just would quote like what Kirby would said. And then he just starts talking about like the stuff that, maybe if he's not there, what we do about it and stuff like that. not one time did you see any type of speculation of like what might be going on. And because that's the way it should be. It's integrity within like journalism. Like it's not hard. It really isn't. And yeah, you may not get the extra clicks that earn you the extra money on it by doing it, but like you probably gain respect of more people by being one of the media outlets that didn't do that. And personally, if I see that you're one of the media outlets that just spread lies when you're supposed to be an quote unquote insider or have that connection, once again, like you said, that's where people go as fans, the ones that don't know what's going on. And the reason they turn to media is to learn about it. And they're supposed to be getting accurate information from you. If you're doing that and giving them false information like that and just making up for clicks on there, anything that you say from here on out is invalid to me, and I'm going to, like, even if it might be right, I'm going to have to see it somewhere else before, and I'm going to have to see it from an article or from a news outlet that I didn't see do that with. In the meantime, you lost all credibility. To me, that should kind of damage your reputation rather than get you extra money for a couple clicks. To me, it kind of could ruin and take more money out of your pocket long term. I mean, that's just personally, that's how I look at it. I know we all kind of have a similar sentiment behind that in this room, and like working with Brooks and the stuff that we've all done there, like it just kind of seems to be the way we think as a whole. I think that's why we all get along, because we have a similar mindset with how we handle these things and how we look for other people to handle it. These are kids. We're younger. You're at UGA right now. Like it doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be like that give them a little bit of like credit and a little bit of grace, because you're still dealing with young adults. They're going to make mistakes. And yeah, they do have a different type of life set in front of them. Yeah, they have the opportunity to make it to the league, go to the NFL, make a lot of money. It doesn't change the fact that they're still young adults that are trying to learn how to live this life like everybody else. They just have a microscope over top of them while they do it. And it's not fair to sit here and say that they're bad people because they make small mistakes.
Yeah, last week I talked to Gene Cathcart, head coach of Jefferson, coaching Starks. I asked him about Starks recruitment, what that's been like for him and the team. He just, what Blaine said, it should be fun, and he's having a hard time having fun with it just because of how his boys being dissected. Like I said, he's from Jefferson, not Marietta like Arik Gilbert.
Yeah,
and when you
under the microscope, he's a Georgia commit, and everyone's looking still.
But when you, Malachi's just dealing with a lot at Jefferson. Like his own coach has said, it's you try to have fun, and to their credit, that team they have a really good support structure, and they're making it fun for Starks. But yeah, even the coach has said, you try to have fun with it. It should be fun to go through this as a kid, as a kid that's only not even 18 yet.
Yeah.
Or not even 19, not even 20 yet. Yeah, that's just in our small town up in Jefferson. I can imagine what Arik Gilbert's gone through most of his life being in Marietta as a big time college prospect.
So we'll wrap it up with just show some grace to these young men that are playing, and they represent the team that you love so much that all you should be doing is supporting them. If Kirby Smart's not kicking them off the team or sitting here saying that there's something wrong that they're dealing with internally or whatever like that, if he's telling you the kid's just going through something right now, maybe you should take his word. You should be trusting Kirby to run the program. If you don't, then you probably should find a new team to cheer for anyways. Kirby's done nothing to make you think that he doesn't have like the best interest of everything involved, in his mind while he's doing stuff. So take what he's saying. His word holds a lot of weight. It should. He's the head coach of the program. And if that's what he's telling you, trust that. Don't read these articles that say something else and trust and believe that and be like, what, it sounds like it could very possibly be true. Don't drag this man's name through, the court of public opinion on rumors and something that could be true, might be, or, it's possible, I could see it, all that kind of stuff. Just let it go. And just learn to love the program for what it is and just focus on what it is, being a fan and really just enjoying the team as a whole, and support those guys because they play for that team that you love so much, that I love so much, and that Jonathan and Kyle love so much. That's how we'll end it on this one. Just support them. The kid's going through, once again, I'll use it one more time. It's not a problem child. He's a young man going through a problem or dealing with a problem. That's it. And we look forward to seeing him play for Georgia in the future. You know, he'll be here. We get to support him. We're right now, shift your focus away from that and let it be what it is, and just focus on the fact that Georgia plays against Clemson in 2.5 weeks from now.
College football starts, man. Get excited about that.
If you're not excited and willing to just focus on that and let something else go, then I don't know what to tell you either. Maybe you should be finding a new hobby in your spare time than paying attention to college. If you like college football, man, it's the time to pay attention to it.
Greatest time of the year.
It's about to be a lot of fun. I'm super excited about it and seeing how everything goes for Georgia. I hope you are as well. I know all of y'all are sitting with me here. So we're just going to prepare for it. You know, next week, we don't know what we're going to talk about yet. We never know. Today is when news dropped on the injuries with the 2-star players, you know, being Darnell Washington, Tyke Smith. We always kind of wait. We always made the joke. Jonathan even texted us and made the joke earlier. He said, listen, even though we shifted the day that we started recording and doing stuff, didn't change the fact that big news always drops when we're supposed to record. Give us our content the day
never
of.
fails.
So we'll see. Join us next week and see what we do. And hopefully you did get the chance to watch this on YouTube. If not, and it's going to be up still, we're going to make something work where we at least get stuff on YouTube in the future. Make sure you like or subscribe everything with us on YouTube so you get notifications of when we post new videos. Keep up with us on all social media platforms. You know, you can follow us on Twitter at Dogs Daily. POD is the username there, and then also on Facebook at facebook.com/dogsdailypod. Those will change to, you know, Classic City stuff soon. We're kind of giving it a little bit of time before we shift everything fully to the Classic City Sports, you know, name and branding on there. So that way you still find us if you looked at us before. We don't want you to lose us and not be able to locate us all of a sudden because we changed everything. But with that being said, keep it classy in the Classic City, and we'll see you guys next week.